Welcome to the Paycheck to Profit podcast, where your host, Robert Johnson, connects with individuals using their spare moments, improving their lifestyle by converting their paychecks into profits. Yo, what's up? Thanks for joining the Paycheck to Profit podcast. I am your host, Robert Johnson, and today I'm joined by the incredible Mr. Brady Barker. Brady, thanks for jumping on. Super excited to have you here today.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, man. So I know we're going to get into a lot of stuff today, but why don't we just kick it off with you sharing a little bit about your background, your history, how you got into real estate, and then we'll dig in as we go through that conversation together.
Awesome. Sounds good. So for myself, I was actually in college at the time when I knew I wanted to invest in real estate. It was just something that I had heard a lot of good things about. I knew that a lot of people, successful individuals would get into real estate investing. So I was looking at a career in the military at the time, and my idea was, well, I want to start, utilizing the VA loan, very common thing that a lot of military members use, and be able to start buying up some houses over the years. My idea was, buy a few houses, 5, 10 houses, at the end of a 20-year career and be set. And so I wanted to get started, though I was impatient. So I started actually working part-time in property management between, classes. I would go out and work several days a week doing property management. So that's how I got started there, and actually kind of led me down a detour to end up working for a multifamily real estate firm. And so I helped manage their acquisitions, then also started coaching for those owners, had another company, so I was able to do that. And then now I am full-time in real estate investing with my own firm, Black Cedar Investments. I'm still in the National Guard, and then also, doing my own consulting firm. So transitioned a little bit over, that's been about the last 5 years or so, that kind of gone from that point of being, what the heck am I going to do with my life? Let's start somewhere, to having it completely take me down this path.
Dude, that's awesome. I knew you were in the military, but I don't know that we've actually talked about it. Like, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for the service. Obviously, really, truly means a lot. Going back to what you said, so it sounds like, and honestly, I didn't want to bring age into it, but are you under 30?
Yes, sir. 25.
Oh my gosh. I'm so old, man. Dude, that's awesome that, you're 25 and you've come this far, and, taking it from your original goal of owning some properties throughout your military career and pivoting into that property management company, and then taking it way further by joining up with the multifamily company. And that's Multifamily Capital Partners, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So for them, how long have you worked with that group?
Yeah. So I worked for Multifamily Capital Partners for about a year and a half. And then I worked for the Multifamily Mindset for 3 years.
Okay. Okay. So during that time, like how did that open your mind to changing your vision? Your original goals and vision at the end of your military career to, I'm going to jump into multifamily and take this whole different course of action.
Yeah. No, that's a good question. For me, it was almost like this yo-yo effect where on one end of the spectrum, I was like, yeah, I'm going to have 10 units. And then all of a sudden I was like, I got into the multifamily space, and very blessed, to have awesome mentors. And I got started, and I'm like, oh my gosh, go tell my wife we're going to own 2,000 units by the end of this year. I was like, let's do this. Like, I'm excited. Learn about this thing called syndications. She's just over there like, what's going on, So I kind of went from one end of the spectrum to the other. And then, like, as I got further into it, I kind of balanced out to find, okay, realistically, what does this look like for me? What's the timeline? What's the amount of units that I can get, with the lifestyle I want to lead, and find that balance. So for me, it was an awesome journey of saying, okay, well, let's see what's possible here. Now let's find out, what do I want to do to live the lifestyle that is ideal for myself and my family.
Yeah, dude, that's awesome. I think that is kind of an eye opener for a lot of people wanting to do real estate in a small scale, and then you kind of have the curtains drawn back and you see that there's so much more opportunity with multifamily in
Yeah.
so many different ways. And real estate in general, you have hundreds of ways to make money. There's limitless ways that you can insert yourself into a deal somewhere, or you can buy property this way, or you can do that. So it's cool to kind of be able to adjust. I think making those adjustments, it's not easy sometimes. And I'm sure that when you're talking about this with your wife, it probably wasn't just one conversation, right? Like, what did that look like, at the beginning of that conversation to when she was actually ready to move forward? I know from
Yeah.
experience that, it takes some time and really understanding and like more information. So like, what did that look like at the beginning when you were
Yeah.
first talking to her about it?
I'll say a lot of trust for sure. Like, she's an amazing woman. I don't know if I would have trusted me as much as she has up to this point, right? Because it's like, let's be real. The conventional like thought process that I had coming into this is, oh, I'm so young. Oh, who am I to get into doing this? And I had to just completely reverse that and put all that aside and say, hey, why not me? Why can't I do this? And so and she especially believed in me a lot, even when I couldn't explain it well. So yeah, it was a lot of conversations. It's a lot of showing, hey, here's exactly what I'm doing. You know, um, it's like, hey, why are you putting in 60, 70 hour work weeks and I don't even know what you're doing, and so I had to start getting a lot better at explaining and showing, hey, here's the vision, here's what we're doing, and here's where we're going to get to. It's still a process now. Actually, her and I have a date scheduled here in a week and a half where we're going to review, our goals, our vision, kind of do our yearly planning session. So it's a never ending process, at least for me up to this point. But I owe a lot to, my wife putting a lot of trust in me, even when I haven't had things figured out completely.
Yeah, dude, there's a lot to say with the partner behind the
Yeah.
scenes, right? And I think at some point I realized this too, is that I wasn't doing a good enough job explaining it at the beginning. And you
Yeah.
called it out too. Like, that's an ongoing thing. But for me, I feel like that was probably one of the biggest opportunities to probably get momentum sooner, is to take more time in the back end with my wife and family about what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, what that timeline looks like realistically, and really get that buy-in and partnership ahead of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
So anybody listening that wants to start a side gig, make sure to get buy-in and connect and communicate with your partner early and let them know and get their input. Make sure that they're involved in that conversation, what that looks like. There's a lot of sacrifices, I think, that come with it.
Yeah.
And I don't know that it's truly known until you are going through and living it. So, that was one of the things I noticed. I don't know about you, but can you share some times where, maybe there was some stress on the relationship because of this? And, what does that really look like when you get working through that?
Yeah. No, it's a great point. I remember hearing the phrase, there is no such thing as balance, right? Like going into entrepreneurship. Because I didn't really grow up around many entrepreneurs, and neither did my wife. So it was kind of a new thing, a new world to be thrown into. The idea of, work life balance was always ingrained in us. But I kept hearing that there is no such thing as balance. And I was like, it took me a while to understand what that meant, and it means that, the way I've interpreted it at least is that yeah, some days there's not going to be balance at all, especially if you look day to day. Like there's days where, between military commitments and then having to make sure that I get caught up on work after those military commitments and stuff, it's like you gone for days or even weeks at a time. And so it's definitely this give and take, right? So my wife and I have to be very careful to plan out and look at, hey, what's this next week look like? What's, the next month, the next quarter? How do we make sure that we are both doing what we need to feel fulfilled in life, we have a child that, adds a level of complexity, right? I can't even imagine having more than one. I'll, respect to all the parents out there.
Oh yeah.
But it's, you know, we make sure that we have to communicate. And there's been multiple times where I haven't communicated well. My wife's like, "Hey, why are you? It's 9 p.m. Where the heck are you at?" And I'm like, "I thought I told you tonight I was working late, right?" Like, and it's the simple things like that, right? And so for her and I, we have to make sure that we have a shared calendar. Last night we reviewed it together. We say, "Hey, for the next 2 days, it's looking like a 9 p.m. night. For the 2 days after that, it's going to be more of a 6 p.m. night, and then Saturday." Going to be work until 3 p.m. So then we can go on a date that evening. It's like making sure that we know that the expectations are clear. I have to make sure that I'm careful to, like Sunday, for example, this week, I'm going to be putting as much time as I can in with our son, since that's the day this week. That's just how it shakes out. Every week's going to be a little bit different. So that was a big mental shift I had to switch from is, hey, it's not going to be 9 to 5. Some days, some weeks, it's going to be almost nothing, that I'm able to see my family. Other weeks, I'll make sure that we set aside complete time for them. So I would just say that communication aspect, switching our brains, and figuring out what does balance look like for us, because the balance that as we knew it doesn't really exist.
Yeah, man, that's an awesome point. And for those listening, I would go back and listen to that one more time, take some notes, really focus on the point that you're not going to find balance every day. It's how you balance out the weeks or the months or the years even, and making sure that you do make the effort to find that balance, but it just might not happen every day. And I think that's a big misconception. So thank you for calling that out, is that every day is not going to be perfectly balanced, but you can make adjustments as you go to make sure you have time for your family, make sure that you have time for the business and still move things forward in both areas. So I'm curious. Earlier you talked about, I think you said like, who am I to do this, And
Yeah.
that's one of the things that I think a lot of people face when they're going into trying something new, is that they get a little bit of imposter syndrome and they have self-doubt. And I I know I've gotten it. I'm sure every entrepreneur has it at some point, multiple times throughout different stages as they're growing. Like, what's something early on that you kind of thought of as, maybe something where you didn't think it was possible, or you maybe had that self-doubt, but now you're in a position where you're like, why did I even think about that? Like, that's silly. I'm a pro at that now.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. There's probably a lot of things. I mean, for me, it's like my default has been to doubt myself, right? Ever since growing up, it's been a prior programming I've had to actively work on that confidence in myself. But I'd say a specific example, I mean, I know we were talking about it before the show, but is even just putting myself out there on social media. That's never something I like to do. I didn't really ever like to show my face or, be active with putting myself out there. And, there was never just a light bulb moment for me, but it's been a more of a gradual process over the last few years of, hey, starting to put out content, even if I'm embarrassed by my own content. And, now I'm just like, you know what? If somebody doesn't like it, they don't like it. That's okay, right? Like, hopefully my mom likes it, hopefully a few other people do, right? But like, and then I've started to see though that, like, hey, actually you get people reaching out and they're interested in investing or they want to learn more, and you start making new connections. It's like, oh my gosh, it's so worth it. Even if it's just for one person, why not? Why don't I do that? And so for me, it was like, hey, get over myself. It doesn't matter if I'm, scared of doing this. Who might I be able to help with this? And that's where, like, now I get excited at the opportunity for that. Obviously, that's why we're here on this podcast. That's
Yeah.
why we're putting different opportunities like this, because who knows who might be able to resonate and hear from it. And there may be some days where nobody does, right? I've realized that. But then, even if it's just one that week, you know, at least at the start, I started to see, okay, like this is something that, get over myself. And now feel totally comfortable with it. If people don't like it, they don't. But at least there's going to be somebody out there that I know or that I've seen in the past, right? that will be helped by the things I've put out.
Yeah, dude, I love that because I think so many people, especially with social media, get stuck in that where they have that doubt of, is this content going to be the right thing for everybody? And
Yeah,
it's not. And you can't please everybody. But the idea is that you can put it out and the message is going to be the right message for somebody. And they're going to see it eventually. And whether it's not this post or it's that post, it will happen. And the more you do it, the more you put yourself out, you're building your personal brand and providing confidence that you are adding value day in and day out. And it, like you said, it might not be for everybody, but that's fine because there's a ton of people that are going to get value from that more than what you even think sometimes.
yeah, exactly. It's like, hey, you may not be everybody's cup of tea, but you're somebody's cup of tea, right? And that's what makes it beautiful, right? Is even you could have two people saying the same thing or similar thing, and just it resonates more coming from one message. And so that's where it's like, hey, take that shot, put it out there. You're the only thing you're doing is not giving yourself or other people a chance if you don't.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think I've noticed this personally for just, being connected with you on LinkedIn and Facebook, Instagram, all those things. And what I've noticed too is that you've been posting a lot more and not only you, and I don't know if this is a direct influence of you speaking to your partners, but Zach and Hunter, I see a lot of posts from them too now. So I don't know if that was something that you guys grouped together and said, hey, this is an intentional thing that we're going to be putting focus on, or if that was just like a natural, they saw you doing it and, maybe you talked a little bit about it, but now they're doing it as well. But your whole team, I see them all across social media channels and putting out good content. So props to you.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's definitely a little bit of both, right? They're saying, "Hey, we gotta see this." They're seeing the positive effects from it because I think sometimes we just get in the trap of, "Oh, well, I do acquisitions, or I do underwriting, or I do due diligence." That's kind of what I told myself before, and yeah, they started to see, "Hey, we're actually getting some good responses from this," and then that led us to have a meeting to be like, "Hey, listen, let's get more consistent with this. Let's make sure we're all on the same page." So yeah,
That's awesome.
100% appreciate that.
Nice. One thing too, before switching topics, is LinkedIn to me feels like a very, and not to say Instagram or Facebook is negative, but I feel like LinkedIn has so much positivity just coming out of it naturally that when you post your your content on there, it just feels a lot better to get and see those responses and the views that you're getting and the people that you're reaching and things like that. And maybe that's just me. I don't know how you feel about that, but
No, I agree as well. It's definitely the one I'm the most comfortable with, and I do think there is, at least, yeah, like I've noticed the same thing. A lot of positivity, a lot of good things that it's like even if you were just scrolling, you're like, oh, you're actually getting some good value from it. It's not just a distraction or whatever, right? Because of course we know there's good stuff on all the platforms. It's just there seems to
sure.
be a higher concentration.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely more educational focused and value that you can get from it, I think.
Yeah,
Ultimately, it depends on who you follow on Instagram and Facebook and all those things. But generally speaking, I think LinkedIn has a higher concentration, like you said.
yeah.
Yeah. So I'm curious how you feel about this with the statement where people in the military, they'll exceed in real estate. They're gonna be the best real estate investors. And I'll tell you right now, like I somewhat agree with that, but I think it could be worded better that if you have military experience, you're going to succeed in any endeavor that you do when you commit. And I think honestly, it goes for a lot of people, but I think it is enhanced when you have that military background. I'd love to hear your take on it and like how military really sets you up for what you do today and the actions that you take on a consistent basis.
Mm. Yeah, it's a good question. And I will say for myself, being in the National Guard, right? It's like you you're in both worlds all the time, right? Because obviously I still go to drill, I still go to trainings, and then I do everything I do on the civilian side. So it's kind of, I have a lot of buddies who are active duty, a lot of buddies who are in the National Guard. So seeing a little bit of both sides. I mean, I would almost broaden it even more and say, anyone who's truly committed to something and who is going to allow something to change them for the better, that they're going to be proactive about that, then they can utilize that experience or that know-how to be successful in all their endeavors. I think that's where what the military does, it helps engender this mentality of saying, hey, well, I need to make sure that I'm performing. There is no option for defeat, right? If I fail, what do we got to do to make sure that we, you know, come back better on things? We're going to run back that training again, or we're going to make sure that we have the right mentality, or if you don't, it's going to, that mentality is going to be forced upon you, right? In a sense. So, I mean, because I've known plenty of people in the military who have kind of, I don't know, I guess you could say more withered from that, right? They're, they'll take those experiences or whatever and they'll become more bitter from it. But I do see a large percentage of people who will take those things and become a whole lot better. So I would just say, from all of that, the military experience really comes into play of, are you going to allow it to be a positive thing to change you, change your environment? And yeah, like that will allow you to then be successful in all of your pursuits, real estate being a common one of them, just by nature of, a lot of guys and gals in the military moving around a lot. Once again, that was where I got the mentality originally for it. So yeah, just allowing the situations you're in, no matter what they may be, to motivate you to improve your situation, to improve your surroundings. I think that's what really makes the difference.
Nice. Yeah, I I totally agree with that. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
So I want to jump back into speaking of transitions and that. Right before we jumped on this and recording, we were talking about your transition out of a W-2 role. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about that role that you were in, maybe a high level of what you were doing, and then what your plan is going forward into 24, and let's jump into that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Yeah, so really for me it's been a process, right? So I still have a W-2 with the military, right? It's not full-time
Sure.
National Guard. So and then I had a W-2 for a while that then transitioned into a 1099 position, and then recently that contract ended on good terms, great relationship with the company, just going to pursue other things, and then still having the, self-employed with Black Cedar Investments. So for me, it's been more of a transition of where I had several W-2s, like two or three before, to then getting down to two, to then being down to one currently with no 1099, and kind of almost, when people say burning the boats, that's how it feels. It's been more of a gradual process, but even then there's kind of like that fear where you're saying, oh my gosh, like I don't really have much of a paycheck, right? Like it's all dependent upon what I do. So although it's been a process, I'd say over the last year or two, right now is where it kind of hits more real, and it's exciting but scary at the same time.
Oh man, I can imagine. So yeah, I mean, that paycheck is kind of like a superpower in a way where you have that comfortability, but at the same time it can maybe hinder some people from doing what they really want to be pursuing, right? And so it's that fine balance between what each person like needs to do. And so I'm super excited for you. I'd love to hear more about what your next kind of endeavor is going into 2024. Really, I've only heard that you're looking at doing some consulting. So I'd love to hear about what that's like and what your plan is for that moving forward.
Yeah, for sure. So, of course, consulting is a very broad realm. So, I've been doing coaching 1099 up up to this point the last few years. Or once again, I transitioned from W-2 to then 1099 to now being off on my own with the consulting. And so I'm taking the skills I've learned from coaching to put them into practice in consulting. I found that, I recognize different things in, working with real estate investors. I've been extremely passionate about it. I've really enjoyed my time, coaching for real estate investors. And I was just like, man, I want to be able to get more involved. And so I started looking at how could I make a greater impact with people's businesses and help propel their businesses forward. So what I'm doing is my consulting practice will focus on strategic consulting for real estate investors and building a basic business operating system. So meaning the way that people, set their goals, that they, run meetings, that really they take, I like to say in a nutshell, things from their long-term vision down to their day-to-day tasks and create continuity there. Because I've seen a lot of disconnect in my own life and in plenty of other businesses, and especially among real estate investors. We're busy people who have multiple jobs. It's hard to be able to manage all those things. You can't just say, hey, from 9 to 5, I'm doing this, from 5 to 9, I'm doing this, because life happens. And so that's really where I'm focusing in on is how can people take their vision, their long-term vision to their day-to-day tasks, have continuity there, plug in some systems, some software, and be able to work with people through those things.
Dude, that's awesome. I am super spot on with, the difficulty
Yeah.
of just getting the systems in place. I think so many people have the vision, but to be able to integrate all of the work that goes behind it and the infrastructure of the systems and the software, like you said, like getting it all put together is not everybody's strong suit.
Yeah.
Everybody has a vision. Like you want the vision of, you're going to be at X amount of dollars or X amount of units or whatever, but how do you really get that into motion?
Exactly.
So are you looking to work with mostly active investors then, right? Like people that you were coaching kind of on the 1099 contract, like those type of investors where they're actively looking at acquisitions, or are you looking at passive investors, or like what does that dynamic look like?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I would say it's primarily for active investors. Obviously, if there's passive investors, a lot of these principles do translate over as well. But really, it's for people working to juggle multiple jobs, and they may not be to the point where it makes sense to bring on a full blown 2 year rollout of a business operating system, for example. It's saying, hey, what can you do now while you're juggling multiple different things as an active real estate investor to create more momentum, propel your business forward now.
Have you gotten to the point of setting any goals on how many people you want to take on, or how many properties, or like I don't know if you even went to that area, but like how many people you want to take on is one thing, but then how many properties you want to help people acquire through your assistance essentially.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So yeah, I've evaluated it for myself, and 60 people would be the absolute maximum. I would prefer to be more towards 20 because I'll be able to offer,
Sure.
differing amounts of help depending on, some people want more hands-on help, more strategy sessions. Some people just want it on an as needed basis. So somewhere between 20 to 60 is where I'll land with clients, just from a personal bandwidth. And
Sure.
then with that, I want to make sure that each client is able to have sustainable growth. It's in that sense, it's similar to the coaching where everyone has different goals, different paces they want to go at. But really, I want to make sure that everyone I'm working with, whether or not they've gotten their first deal, that they're able to sustainably get to that first deal or to that next deal during the time that we work together.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a good approach. Really like maxing out to 60. Like you said, there might be some people that maybe don't need as much day to day, but I love the more boutique, kind of approach versus
Yeah.
mass scale. And there's so much value to just having that one-on-one or small group conversations and things like that. So yeah, super excited for you and what you're doing there for sure.
Yeah, I
Um,
appreciate it.
yeah, yeah. I think, over your time with the MF Capital Partners and multifamily mindset. I think you've come across coaching hundreds of people, maybe even close to 1,000. I don't even know, but
I haven't kept track, but yeah, probably somewhere in there.
like what kind of trends have you kind of seen from just working with that many people? And like you said, you're focusing on how to get those daily actions, but are there any specifics that kind of stand out where you're like, hey, this is something I know that will improve these people's lives immediately?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. The people that I've seen do the most in the quickest amount of time are those who are just simply putting themselves out there, who are networking, who are, going out on social media, who are really working to expand their current sphere of influence. I've seen many people who are very technically skilled who are able to do a lot of, they're able to get down underwriting, or they're able to, you know, evaluate a ton of different deals, but they'll struggle and they would come to me and they'd say, "Hey, I'm not being able to get anything going here." And I'd say, "Well, okay, how many networking conversations are you having? How many new people are you talking to? What are you posting out there?" And every time they weren't doing any of that. The people that I saw who did make strides, whether or not it was right away, but usually, you know, within a month or two, they would start to see some results in terms of making new connections, having new opportunities, a lot of things coming up. Those are the people who are really putting themselves out there, and that's obviously you're one of those people that I've seen over the last few years that's done freaking amazing with this. So it's fun to see that when it just clicks, when people are like, "Oh yeah, I got it." And like I said, that was something I had to realize myself too, because that's why I say that, from personal experience and from working with a lot of different investors. Man, there's just so much power in starting to put yourself out there.
Yeah, goes back to that personal brand, right? The
Yeah,
sooner you can start, the better. And again, it's probably one of the biggest challenges for most people.
yeah.
And I know I was part of that too. And, when I first started working with you, I was more on that side of doing numbers and, putting the systems in place, but I wasn't talking about it. I wasn't putting myself out there. I was kind of, I don't know about, I wouldn't say I was ashamed, but I just was worried about the perspective that people would have.
Oh, 100%. It's something everyone experiences, or I'd say
Yeah.
at least most people. But man, when you combine those two, that's
Yeah.
what's been cool to see with you, is having the technical expertise along with, the networking, putting yourself out there. Chef's kiss.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So we've kind of hit on it a little bit throughout this conversation, but I want to throw it back out there and say, like, what do you think it really takes for an individual to succeed and not just real estate, but in a growth mindset and lifestyle?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I mean, yeah, I think one of the first things we talked about this right from the start, with both of us having spouses, it's so essential to have a support system. Whether it's a spouse, whether it's a professional group, whether it's other family members or friends, like having people who are in your corner, because it's gonna get tough. It's not a matter of if, it's when it's gonna get challenging. So I think that's one thing. But then the other part is internally, what can you do to make small changes to shift your mentality? That's kind of what we talked about with the military. Is I I remember one of my things going into basic training, for example, was I was very worried that I would come back and I would fit some of the stereotypes that people sometimes have, that I'd be swearing all the time, that I'd be, you know, impatient and, quick to anger, things like that, some of your bad stereotypes that you may see. And I remember that's really what got me on a journey of going into mindset, which obviously attracted me to more of the coaching realm, where I was able to see that, okay, well, there's a lot of things going on outside of me that I can't control on a day to day basis. But what can I do? What can I really control about myself to make sure I'm at peace, to make sure I am growing, developing every single day? For me, prayer, meditation, those things became very real good parts of my life. I guess they always were, right? But they became even more so because I was saying, hey, even if everything goes wrong in my day or I don't have control over whatever it is, this is still talking military example. You may have all sorts of stuff going on externally, but I'm still in control of my mind. And so that's something cool that I was able to really look at, anytime I've been in a military training situation, which I'm not going to sit here and say it's like special forces or anything like that, right? Like basic training and stuff, it's not that intense. But I was able to, use that mentality of saying, hey, I have control of my mind. This is awesome. I'm able to see, strip away all the distractions of the world and be put in somewhat difficult situations, and I control my mind. And then take that, post that into, investing, into family, all those things, and really say and get excited about, hey, how can I, challenge, expand my mindset even more? What can I do to make sure that I'm, not letting anyone else dictate how my life is run? That I'm making sure that I'm, doing the things that I need to every single day to control my mind. So I know I kind of repeated the same thing a few different ways there, but it's something that I'm very passionate about, that I've seen, it's when you see it in somebody, it just clicks, right? It's like, it's hard to tell somebody that. They have to experience it, learn it themselves. I think in the entrepreneur world specifically, mindset's a huge thing, because when people understand that it's really the foundation. That if you're able to get your mindset right, you're able to build however many companies you need to be successful. You're able to do whatever you need to in your day job, to make sure that you're getting where you need to, make sure your family's taken care of, all those things. So I'd say those two big things, having the mindset and the support system have made a huge difference.
Nice. Yeah. I love it. Man, you're on point today.
So I may take a few minutes to get to that point, but I'll get there. So
No, man, it was good. Yeah. So, I mean, I've really enjoyed this conversation, and just, getting a little bit deeper with some of these things. And, like we talked about a little bit before recording, but showing a little bit of your vulnerability, which I appreciate, and really just exposing some of the real life situations that people go through when they're doing this, which it's not easy.
yeah, for sure.
But some people make it look easy, and I would say you are one of them. I have talked to you plenty of times, and you've always got a great attitude. You've always been so valuable, and adding different perspectives and information for me when we talk, and just really appreciate it all around.
Oh, thank you, man. Thank you. That means a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. So, going back to the consulting thing, like where are you at right now? Are you ready to launch and take people on? Or are you still working through that? Like, how could people get a hold of you if they're listening to this and want to get started with you?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So I'm about ready to launch here in a week or two, just getting some things buttoned up on building my website, being able to take things there. But I'm able to get people started right away, have all my back end stuff up. So my business is RE Business Consultant. And so my website, which will soon be live, is, rebusinessconsultant.com, or my email is brady@rebusinessconsultant.com. I'm also very active on LinkedIn, like we talked about, other social media platforms. So happy to get in touch with anybody that way.
Sweet. Yeah, I'll make sure to put all that info into the description here so people can check that out.
Awesome. Sounds
Yeah.
good, man.
All right. So I got one more thing here.
Yes, sir.
Random question of the show.
All right. Hit me with it. Let's do this.
What is your favorite road trip song?
Ooh.
I know that's a tough one, but
Road trip song. Aside from saying whatever my wife puts on.
if you were by yourself, road trip.
Yeah. If I'm by myself.
If you had full control, or you're the wingman and you get control.
Yeah. I feel like this should be an easier decision than it is. I just got back from a road trip. I'm trying to think. What did we even listen to? I would say the song "Down" by Matt Kearney.
Okay.
It's probably not like a well known song, but it's just like that song, I don't know if it's technically like downbeat, but I'm like
Hmm.
any mood I'm in, I'm good for that song. Like one of
Nice.
my I think one year like Spotify told me I listened to it like 200 times. I didn't mean to, it just happened. But that song, like especially if you're driving at night and you just need to be like vibing and go into like a good like mental spot, like that's my song for that.
All right. Yeah, I've not heard of it, so I'll check that out and I'll post that into the description as well so people can check it out.
Yeah, for sure.
Dude, sweet. Do you have any closing thoughts or anything you want to share?
Man, I just appreciate you having me on today, and I know we talked about vulnerability a few times. I would just say one thing that I've always thought about actively is how so often I think myself or any of us when we're telling stories of our lives, oftentimes is we want to make it out to be, hey, I was in this spot, now look at me, I'm great, right? And that's one thing that I want to make sure that I'm not always doing that because sometimes, right, we have a tendency to look at everyone else and think they're doing better than us, and so it's this vicious cycle. So I would just say with the vulnerability is remember that you're probably doing better than you are, for anyone who's listening, and everyone else is probably doing amazing things as well, right? And so why don't we work to lift each other up, but don't just assume that you're not doing as well as other people, right? Like for me right now, like full vulnerability, I'm scared to death with starting a new business, right? There's all new challenges that come with it. And but that's okay. I'm excited about it, right? And that's why I'm still able to be at peace, even though there's part of me that's scared to death. It's like it's fun. You face those challenges and you face those fears, and remember that you're doing better than you are. So that's the last thing I would say to anyone listening to this.
Dude, spitting fire right at the end. Are you able to pick that mic up and drop it or
I don't know. It might make a lot of noise, but
Dude, thank you so much. Really great having you on and looking forward to following along and seeing where you go with this consulting business and continuing to follow you with your own real estate company, Black Cedar. So congratulations. Thank you.
yes, sir. Thank you for sure.
Yeah. Everybody else, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode.